Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and deceased. My name is Emily Sophia, and I'm going to be breaking down the latest of The Walking Dead for you guys. Season 4, Episode 12 still. So, spoiler alert, as we go forward, I will be bearing all in this review, as always. And I'm going to do my absolute best to refrain from inserting my reactions to the Oscars into this video since I just got done watching that. And in fact, I did this weird crazy thing that people who don't have DVR do, and I was going back and forth between The Walking Dead and the Oscars. And suffice it to say, I am a sack of emotional fatigue and exhaustion all across the board because I invest in this stuff, perhaps to an unhealthy extent, but it's the stuff that makes you feel alive. So anyways, we will dive into the thick of it and we'll see how long this review actually is, because as far as the scope of this episode of The Walking Dead, it was very narrow. And that's not to say that it was a bad episode, it's just that it was surprising in a lot of ways. I mean, after last, I guess the beginning of the season when we had the episode that was completely centered on the governor, that sort of heralded, is that even a word? Or it brought in this new era in the show of episodes that are more character-centric than trying to focus on the group as a whole. And I mean, it's representing that fragmentation and really getting into the nitty-gritty of stuff because, you know, and it's like I've said before in previous reviews, there's a lot of this slow burning story arcs that they're playing with, and I like that to a great degree. But I have to admit that I would have liked to have seen at the end of this episode a tie-in with the other groups, and yet they're not quite there yet. So there was a little instance in the episode where when Daryl and Beth enter the country club, they're cruising around, clearing rooms, doing their shenanigans, and Beth finds the spoon, and there was like a close-up on that spoon, and this little insignia on the inside said Washington, D.C. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that's where the new group is headed with Eugene, the scientist, and you know the whole crew, and if I'm not mistaken, yeah, that's where they're headed. So I don't know if that was a little bit of a tie-in or if I'm totally crazy and I'm remembering things inaccurately, but I'm trying here. So anyways, I would have liked to have seen the other characters. I mean, there's this constant tension because there's so many different arcs going at once. And there's this desire to see how everything comes together, and yet this episode was really about that intensive character development, which I can't fault them for, because I have to say, Norman Reedus, he put on a spectacular show, and seeing that much emotional volatility, that, you know, just the way that he projected it was so raw and real, and, you know, I mean, it took a little bit of moonshine to tease it out of him, but to have that moment where Daryl is reflecting on everything that's happened up to this point, and what this episode really hinges on is the emotional development, not only between Daryl and Beth, but, you know, for them as individuals and how they kind of correlate in that. Because where Beth is at, she has come from a place of profound self-pity and disenchantment with this world that's falling all around her, to realizing and owning her ability to survive, and she clings to that and she finds meaning in it. But that confronts the almost nihilistic view of Daryl, who doesn't seem to find meaning in anything, and that's what she's trying to get to this whole time. It's as if in Beth's desire to have this first drink and to have this experience, she also wants to kind of find a new way to break through to Daryl. And I dare say that that is kind of sort of what takes place, but we get to see that yeah, he has been profoundly rocked by what happened at the prison and by the loss of Herschel especially. He feels that responsibility, that he could have done something to intervene in that split second. You know, everyone was at standstill. in that stalemate before the curtain closed, before the axe was swung, and there was this attempt at diplomacy. There was this hope, and I mean, Daryl and everybody was all lined up at the prison. They had their weapons, their firearms, they were ready to go. But there was this moment where they all believed that something totally different could come from this. And then, as it turns out, it was not exactly what Mr. Governor had in mind. And so we get to see in that critical moment, as, you know, I mean, Daryl, he's a little bit soused. He's not exactly in his average state of mind, but that's kind of the beauty of it too, is getting to see Daryl in this place where he not often is. And to see him lash out at Beth for where she'd been, but then that ultimately leads to him feeling responsible for what transpired and feeling that ache. And so there's sort of this mountain that Daryl and Beth get over in that moment, is, you know, realizing that, yeah, Daryl's connected to this. He gets it. It's not just about, you know, roughing it in the woods and tearing off hunks of snake jerky, you know. There is a real emotional side to all of this, and who would have thought that it'd be brought out by a little game of I've never done this, little moonshine, little slipshod target practice with the zombies. Yeah, I mean, it was a really interesting episode, and I mean, as far as the emotional tensity, it was a great episode for both of those characters. And in hindsight, there's a lot that I liked about the fact that it was just the two of them and seeing how things progressed. And I have to say that the whole, you know, the kind of focus on drinking and the ways that these characters begin to cope with things as they're nearing the edge of what they feel like they can handle. It reminded me of Merle back in the previous season where, right before he had his face-off with the governor, and I mean, he got a little bit tossed and he was cruising around, you know, cranking the music. Or was it just the music? I don't know. I guess you could argue for music being a sort of intoxicant, but I thought that he also had some booze to help him along the way. But yeah, I mean, it reminded me, Daryl's position in this episode kind of reminded me of Merle, but it's on a flip side, because he's in this place where he doesn't know when the end will be, and Beth points that out. She's like, you know, you're a survivor, you're gonna be there at the end of it all, and that's kind of a profound revelation for Daryl, he just keeps going and going, and it's hard to sometimes stop and own the fact that, like, yeah, I've been through quite a pretty little bit, and, you know, going from this place where he was just tagging along as Merle's toady to being the one who has made it through all of this. I mean, it's gonna have, I think, some interesting implications for how he interacts with others in the future, you know, assuming that he comes, you know, into contact with other living beings in the future. I don't know, next week's sneak peek seems to suggest that we're getting into some dicey territory. I mean, I feel like it's been too long since we lost a major character, so be bracing yourself for that. I know I am, because I am paranoid as crap from all these shows that I watch and how they tear my soul to pieces without a second thought. But anyways, there was something, oh, and also, you know, getting to see the character development on Beth's side as well, and I applaud her, you know. I kind of felt similarly about her as I did with Carl. Didn't really dig him, wasn't into the attitude, was sort of like, you could get offed and I might not shed a tear, per se. But, and just this general, you know, we have the characters that we're annoyed with, and you think about it and you feel kind of bad, like when you're just like, him, he could, you know, get his neck snapped and that'll be that, and I just want to focus on this person. It seems really bad. It doesn't reflect well on our humanity, but that's the sort of alternate reality that these shows create. So anyways, you know, I kind of felt that way about Beth for a while as well. I I was really turned off to the way that she reacted to all that was transpiring, and with, you know, cutting herself and all of that. And that's sort of, you know, what Daryl comes at, you know, swinging in his drunken state, targeting her for that. But, you know, again, for her, she's trying to find a way to make her survival meaningful, because it does mean something. She's just trying to figure out what to do with it. What is life, you know? And it's that fundamental kind of existential struggle at the heart of it all, aside from, you know, golf clubbing, zombies, faces off, and rage, and all that good stuff you get to do when the world's falling apart. But so you know, that I like the sort of context of the I've never done this drinking game, because, you know, they're loosening up, and it also provides us with a way to get to know them better, short of just like, you know, I'm gonna tell you my life story. Can I tell you my life story? I'm gonna tell you my life story. Because, I mean, they could do that if they wanted to, but I think it provides an interesting way to sort of, you know, work our way further back into these characters that we've known in the present all along, but what brought them there. And so, and we got to, you know, hear just a smidge more about Herschel, whom I miss and love dearly. So that's, you know, that's always valuable to me. And, yeah, and so we find out some interesting things, maybe things that we'd already had a sense about before, you know, with Daryl having, like with Beth's questions about Daryl being in prison, and he gets on the defensive like, oh, that's the kind of guy you think I am, and you know, so we see the differences in experiences, but we also see the things that bring them together, and they're both little siblings, and they're both trying to find a way to make the fact that they've made it this far actually have some clout, some weight, some direction even. And, you know, there's an interesting part when they were in the country club as well, where Daryl, he takes a bunch of money that they find, and it's kind of like, what are you gonna do with that, per se? Invest, you know? Set up a new account just in case, stick it in a capsule, see if it, you know, gains any interest. But, and then it's very symbolic by the end when they decide to burn the place down, and the place that reminds Daryl, too, of his childhood, and they kind of, you know, have that burn, baby, burn moments where they're, you know, because at first they're trying to figure out a way to settle, a way to make things work. But there's also a lot of memories that are brought up for them in this place, and with what they've experienced there as well. And so for them, it's more worthwhile to just get back on the road, keep moving forward, and, you know, to just keep progressing with what they've learned about each other, with what they've found to be meaningful. And it's not just about drinking the days away. And it's not just about grabbing what you can and giving nothing back, you know. There's something to be strived for. So that was what I liked about the episode. Again, was getting to dig deeper, to see further into these characters, and to give a second chance to a character who I wasn't really into before. But she has so much strength to her, and she was successfully able to get under Daryl's skin. But yeah, lots of really interesting little moments that I could pick apart. But what did you guys think? I mean, what stuck out to you as significant? Were you bored to tears? Was it, you know, keeping you on lock? Again, I loved that moment with, and just Norman Reedus, kudos to you just for that soul-shattering moment of realization. And I mean, we had a lot of things we already knew that were solidified, as in, you know, Daryl's badassery and the stuff that he came from, the abuse that he sustained, the things he's gotten through, and the way that he takes care of Beth too. And the primary struggles of the episode were more interpersonal, and so for some they prefer, you know, more dealings with the undead and those sort of, how creative can the set designers get, and the, you know, the production team as far as all the craziness we're getting into. I think the country club was a really interesting environment for them to work their way through, you know, with all the different rooms and spaces, and and the different kinds of zombies they found along the way too, like, you know, the rich bitch zombie and all the ones that were like strung up. It just goes to show, like, there's a whole nother humanity out there. It's hard to say who's actually still around, but it kind of paints a picture of how things went down in other corners of the world, and it really makes all the more meaningful the survival of the characters that we stuck with all this time. So that's kind of the way that I see it. Again, I'm really looking forward to seeing the other groups, and I know that we're going to at least get to tap into what's happening with Maggie and Sasha and Bob. They got 6 bullets left. They got 4 minutes to go, as Justin Timberlake and Madonna would say, but I mean, it's exciting stuff. I'm definitely starting to get anxious for that collision of groups, seeing who comes together and where things go. You know, getting out of the woods, metaphorically and physically, and coming into, you know, the hunters is what's been hinted at, I know, from people who have read the comics and all that, so I'm pretty excited. But anyways, I'll go ahead and cut it off here. You know, you got sort of my psychological analysis, my reactions and things like that. And if you care to, you can follow me on Twitter for fun live tweeting of the different shows I do and my general life, I guess. And then I also have a blog on Tumblr. You can follow that link in the description, and a public Facebook page where I post updates and all that cool stuff too. So I have a lot of other videos that I'm looking to work on as well. The Last of Us DLC, The Wolf Among Us, The Walking Dead the game, which the new episode for that is dropping this week, depending on when you're watching. It is March 2nd right now, so there is much excitement. I'm going to vlog whatever I possibly can. I'm just a couple months out from graduating from college, and then once I do that, I'll just, you know, I'll just hole up in my room, you know, take my bachelor's in English literature and make videos for you guys forever, you know, because that makes sense. But you guys take care. Thank you so much for watching. You know, anything I missed, drop it in the comments and we will chat there. So y'all take care as always, and I'll be back before you know it.
Just another false alarm.